So we're so happy to have today Jon Medved, the founder and CEO of OurCrowd. And OurCrowd isn't just a fantastic platform for investing in Israeli startups. It is an amazing Israeli startup. Jon, you really changed the way that venture capital works by opening up to crowdfunding and being able to bring down the level of minimal investment and opening up Israeli startup success to so many individual investors. So more power to you for that, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Caleb. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. So first of all, what's going on at OurCrowd? I mean, I know you've raised over $1 billion.
We're
right?
actually close to $2 billion.
$2 billion that you deployed in Israeli startups.
So we started 9 years ago. We actually had our offices nearby in Jerusalem. We've now grown. We're about 300 people, close to $2 billion under management. We're invested in over 300 different companies, and we're invested across many different sectors. So everything from cybersecurity to the next, alternative protein to mobility to all kinds of software for privacy protection or compliance, and lots of clean tech, healthcare, things that are really good for the planet. And what we found is that there's this huge hunger among both the listeners today who are going to be sharing this Arise Summit, but also the broader public from all over the world in what's going on here in Israel and the startup nation specifically, but more generally in the world of innovation and investing. And they see these amazing companies finally go public, but they go public at billions or many billions of dollars.
And you've had a few exits like that, if I'm not mistaken.
We've had a bunch.
Yeah,
We've had actually
unicorn exits.
56 exits so far at OurCrowd, and several of them, major unicorns such as Beyond Meat in alternative meat, the guys who make the best tasting, plant-based burger. A company called Lemonade, which is not a food tech company, but an insurance company, as well as Uber. We sold a company early to Uber called Jump Bikes. So we got their shares before they went public. So these are, household names. But many people, like your viewers, will ask themselves, how do I get into that before it gets public, right? How do I, I don't want to buy in at a 5 billion or 10 billion. Now, sometimes that's a good transaction if the company becomes an Apple or a, Google and is worth $1 trillion. Not a bad trade. But how do I get in when it's a 10 million or 20 million or $50 million entity and ride it to becoming $1 billion, getting that, what we call the 10x sort of threshold in venture capital? And for most people, it's been a closed game. They literally, if you didn't know somebody who was really well connected, a family member or whatnot, you could read about it and sort of drool and think about it, but it wasn't reality. So we set up OurCrowd to create a platform digitally where you go to ourcrowd.com. You have to be what's called in America an accredited investor, which means you have to have $1 million of assets outside of your primary dwelling, or you have to have a $200,000 annual income. Now, it turns out that there are about 14 million households in America that make that criteria, which means America is absolutely a prospering country with a lot of blessing from on high.
Probably because of Judeo-Christian roots, which we'll talk about. But before we get to that, what is the minimal investment today of an accredited investor?
In OurCrowd, it's $10,000.
Okay, so still $10,000.
It's still very accessible. Our average investment is considerably more than that. Right. And then we have people who are writing $10 million checks. Yeah. So it's a very democratic platform where you have people who are truly billionaires interacting with wealthy dentists or real estate people or a shopkeeper, people who've saved money in their lives, want to be invested in private companies because the growth in private companies is really where the action is in the investment arena.
For me, it's a no-brainer because if I want to invest some money into the Israeli startup scene, which is a good idea, investing money in Israel is a good idea. Diversifying your investments internationally is a good idea. So I'm looking for Israeli startups. Now, I think every other country in the world, the problem in the startup scene is lack of opportunity, where in Israel, it's the opposite. The problem in Israel is too much opportunity. So how do I sift through thousands, tens of thousands of companies to know what I'm looking at and what I should invest in? And I say OurCrowd is a perfect solution because you have 300 people working for you around the clock doing due diligence and finding the best companies.
That's the whole purpose of our platform. Is we first of all, every company that gets accepted on the OurCrowd platform goes through a very, very rigorous set of diligence process. But then more importantly, we have our own skin in the game, right? Every single deal, we as a general partner invest, right? And that's something that all of your listeners need to make sure that they take to heart. I don't care who they invest with. If the person you're investing with isn't investing on the same terms, okay, getting the same deal that you're getting, run. Okay, don't even walk away, run away. Yeah. Okay, so we're quite, that's sort of one of our, one of our guiding bedrock principles, which is align your interests with your investors. We take our fees, we take from investors, right? Investors pay us management fees, 2% a year, and then they pay us an upside bonus. So if you invest $1 million and we turn it into 10, God willing, okay, then on that $9 million, we take actually 20% up to the first 5x and then 25%. So we get, richly rewarded for success, but that's what you want, okay? Because we work very hard to find what we think are the best deals out there, and then we not only negotiate the price. Remember, you can't just pick up the phone and call Goldman or Morgan Stanley and say, hey, get me this startup. These are not publicly traded companies. They're private. So we set the table. We either join someone else's round. We're always part of a syndicate of some kind. But we set the prices, negotiate the terms, 14 lawyers in-house, making sure we're protected. And then we start a process of trying to add value to the companies.
I'm so sorry you have to work with 14 lawyers. I can tell you this, though. 99% of the lawyers make a bad name for the rest of us.
Yeah, no, hey, as you know, my son is a lawyer who worked with you at some point. Right. And there are good lawyers and there are other kinds of lawyers. But the bottom line is that we then, it's not the end of the process when you make the investment. That's the beginning of the process, because unlike the public market, if you buy Apple or Google stock, no one's expecting you to give advice to the management of these companies. But we, on the other hand, we have to sit on company boards. We do that in about half of our investments, either as an observer or as a full board member. We then need to raise money for the company in subsequent rounds, which is a huge opportunity, because when you find a company that's got an upward trajectory, you want to not just put money in once, you want to follow your bets, as it were, as the company starts to accelerate. We need to add value by introducing them to partners, to distributors, or to people who will do an OEM relationship. We need to introduce them to banks who will take them public or provide a gateway to an M&A or merger. And so that the amount of work that we do from the moment that we've completed the investment process is enormous.
To make sure it succeeds.
You have to be an activist, okay? Yeah. The people who are activists in Wall Street and public companies are few and far between. In our business, in the venture capital industry, everybody's an activist.
Right. So we would fail our viewers if we don't pivot now, just to talk a little bit about, because the Rise crowd said, we love hearing about innovation, we love hearing about these stories, but it's really interested in kind of the Jewish thought, Hebrew principles behind success. You already mentioned some of them. Don't invest in a company that doesn't have skin in the game, right? Like that's a value. That's something that's a guiding light that you implement in your life. And I'm sure as you were growing up, there were certain things taught to you by rabbis that you've implemented into business. And just, if you could mention, what are some of those big things that you've seen?
I think that, first of all, you can look in the Torah, in the Bible, 5 books of Moses in particular, to see enormous lessons and guideposts for for life today in terms of how it goes. It's when I look at, for example, our forefathers of the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, these three were really Renaissance people. Okay, they were combinations of spiritual leaders, but they were business people, right? I mean, Abraham was kaved batzon. He was heavy. Literally, it's interesting how the language hasn't really changed.
With herds, I think.
He had a lot of herds, okay? He was a military leader, right? He went and, tried to save Lot and saved Lot successfully, rescued him from the 5 kings, okay? He was a great evangelist, okay, in terms of spreading the word of God, okay? He was a great sort of host in terms of having people into his tent, which he was this Renaissance man, this extraordinary person. And his son, Isaac, was a hydrologist. Right. In other words,
digging wells.
He was, he foresaw Israel's expertise in water technology, leading the world. Okay, it comes from Isaac. Jacob, on the other hand, was active in biotechnology. Okay, how did he, get all those striped and speckled,
genetic engineering.
Really, he was early genetic engineering with the help of God.
Yeah.
Okay, and you look at that and you say, wait a minute. So this is really interesting. These people in the Bible, first of all, they're full of flaws. Okay, in other words, they're not perfect, and that anybody who sort of doubts the veracity of the Bible would say, wait a minute. If I was writing a story of my people, an origin story, and I wanted to sort of fake it and make it really, I'm going to write some of these things. I'm going to write about incest in my family, okay, with Tamar and Yehuda. I'm going to,
Or the father of our faith saying his wife is his sister in order to prevent.
None of that's going to happen, okay? That's going to be edited out. But it's there because the picture is of human life and about making choices and about living good lives and serving God and spreading God's word. This is all, in the Bible. And part of this is making money and not disparaging wealth, right? Some traditions basically worship poverty, okay? We know them, okay, around the world. We have no issue with wealth, okay? In other words, it's back in the beginning. Okay, and you have responsibility when you get wealth. You have to give a chunk of it away. Okay, and if you don't, you're doing something wrong. You're probably not going to stay wealthy. There are many people who get wealthy and not. I'd love to look at the algorithm and see how many of those people gave the 10% tithing. Okay, because that's a really good way to.
Do you tithe, by the way?
Of course I do. Every religious Jew does.
Right.
Okay, and
it's just it's one of those principles, right, that you live by.
Now there are questions. Is it 10% after tax?
Right.
Is it 10% before tax?
Yeah.
Okay, but
I asked a rabbi
consult your local rabbi.
I asked a rabbi once, do I tithe on my net or tithe on my gross? He said, well, do you want a net blessing or a gross blessing? So, by the way, I'm not giving any advice here, but I thought that was cute. And it was interesting. You said this was from the beginning. I saw when I was reading Genesis some years ago that God's creating the heavens and the earth, and at the end of every one, he says, this is good. And the 8th time he said this is good, what was he talking about? Gold. And the gold of the land was good. So gold is a good thing, right? And this is something probably the Jewish people have understood for centuries, like you said.
Historically, there are other reasons that got involved. I mean, look at Joseph. You can't just start with the first 3. You got to look. Joseph was the classic Jewish business person, politician, government official, great leader who not only saved the Jewish people in terms of providing them with a safe haven in.
He saved the whole Egyptian people.
He saved Egypt. Right. Okay, and he did it right. He was quite respectful to the powers that were at the time. Okay, and then absolutely demanded from his children and whatnot that they bring him back to his land. Okay, in other words, what a great figure in terms of someone who was loyal to tradition, but is modern. Okay, he was this just incredible character.
I hope you don't mind me saying that I think there's something similar to your story and Joseph's story, or OurCrowd and Joseph's story, because saving Egypt, right? So when you're investing in all these technologies that are tackling the greatest crises facing humanity and fighting diseases and saving lives and making life better and for so many people around the world, that's like almost a calling.
First of all, it's part of our responsibility. Our tradition believes very much that creation didn't stop after 6 days, right? In other words, God created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh. Right. And some people, I think, mistakenly understand that it's over, okay? We don't, all the wisdom in the world, everything was done. Okay, no, okay, the way we relate to it is that we have to complete the world. Tikkun olam, it's fixing the world, it's probably not, it's help to complete. It's about the fact that we are partners with God in creation. Okay, every time babies are born, this is creation, Every time
Israel's doing a lot of that.
Oh my gosh,
we're off the charts in the OECD.
We're
3.5 kids.
But it's a family society. It's about believing in the future.
Yeah.
It's somehow disregarding all these dystopian visions, of the world coming to an end. Okay, it's making sure that it doesn't. Right? In other words, you can't just sit back. Right? One of my favorite parts of the Bible are when God chastises Moshe for just praying. Right. Praying is good, but get on with it. He said, he's at the Red Sea and he's praying. He said, lead, do something. You have a
staff in your hands.
Okay? How did things start to happen is when, Nachshon ben Aminadav got into the water up to his neck. And that's when the waters, split. Okay, in other words, you have to act, and there's this bias for action and for engaging with the real world in a holy and positive way. Okay, taking everyday things and making them part of godliness. Yes. Okay, which is a very Jewish, very Hasidic, if you will, in terms of collecting sparks and things. But it's just so. Important. And today, I feel very much that what investors with OurCrowd and outside of OurCrowd are doing in terms of backing companies that are working on green hydrogen, for example, or fusion. We've made investments in perhaps the leading American, we don't just invest, by the way, in Israeli companies. We're right now about 50% of our investments are here in Israel, about 50% are outside of Israel. Because we want to take a global view, and we believe that creating this network with Jerusalem at its headquarters is that's our mission.
But the grid is some innovation for good, would you say? Even the companies that are in the United States?
More than anything else. I mean, I would say if you look, it's called impact investing, social impact. I would say that at least half of our companies, meet some kind of an impact standard. So we're invested in fusion. We're invested in green hydrogen.
What is fusion? I don't even know. I know jazz fusion. It's great.
It's pretty cool music.
So how is fusion helping the world?
Fusion is a clean, safe kind of nuclear energy. Okay. Then instead of a fission reaction, it's a fusion reaction. And we just participated in the largest fusion round, which was a $1.8 billion round of investment in a company called Commonwealth Fusion Systems. And
when the fusion vis-a-vis the fission, it's less detrimental to the environment.
There's virtually no waste. There's no danger. It won't blow up. Okay, it's the future. Very hard to pull off. Okay, we're talking about really big science, and there are many companies going after it. But what's cool about what we're doing is that we're investing alongside Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Michael Bloomberg, some of the biggest investors in the world. And now somebody can come join OurCrowd and get on the same terms, right? In other words, and that's what's democratic about this, is that it used to be that these deals were really, the province of a very, very elite group of good people generally, I think. I'm quite fond of many of these people, but wasn't in, you weren't invited if you're from Peoria, you've worked all your life and saved a few $1 million and you'd like to now invest. Now you can do so. We have a company called H2 Pro, which is doing green hydrogen, right? Which is hydrogen from water. Okay, and it's just unbelievable how important that is. And we're invested also with a huge group of important investors. But it's not just that; it's in food. We have a company called Remilk, which is creating milk protein from cells in bioreactors, basically to grow milk, no cow. So it's not plant alternative where you take, we have a company doing that too called Ripple Foods in America, where you can go to your market. It's like Oatly, but ours is made from pea protein, tastes better, we think, and it's doing very well. But no, this is actually, using sort of biotechnology to create milk without the cow. And you should be aware of how important this is to global warming. They estimate that something close to 10% of greenhouse gases are coming from the dairy industry. Right. It's just a huge, and all of a sudden you can get rid of that, and there's no, and we think that this will ultimately actually provide, and I've tasted it, tastes great, okay, and it will, I think, not only create a great tasting and healthy and no lactose intolerance issues and things like that, but will be a huge impact, on the planet. We have another company called BlueGreen Water Technologies, who are mitigating toxic algal blooms. So, there's this algae that becomes toxic that grows in rivers and lakes all over the world, but particularly in America. And so this company, for example, has been cleaning up lakes and rivers in Florida, such as Lake Okeechobee, a major sort of, important lake for the Everglades and whatnot. Governor Ron DeSantis had seen the company on a visit here.
What would be the business model for something like that?
They get paid a ton of money to get rid of this stuff.
From local governments? From
local governments, because this is not only poisoning the water and killing aquatic life, but it's making the water unsafe for humans. Yeah. So many of these lakes are posted, no swimming or what. So you think about this, you say, okay, wait a minute, I can clean up the environment, I can provide clean energy, I can provide new sources of food, I can improve farmers' yields. We have a ton of companies using satellites and small miniature spectrometers to gain ag data, which will improve the ability to feed the growing planet. There's so much work to be done. So when I wake up in the morning, and I've got a lot on my plate, part of this is just so cool. And I'll tell you the part that really gets me going is the healthcare stuff. Yeah. Because we see lives of people who we literally have saved through our technology. We have a company called Insight Tech that takes care of Parkinson's tremor. And so you'll meet somebody who you'll see the pictures of them where they could not literally hold a glass of water without spilling it. And they get into this machine, takes a couple of seconds, and zap, no more tremor. Okay, we've had them at our summit, which God willing will come back next year. Face to face.
Give me some wood.
Amen to that. We have companies that are like Alpha Tau, who are using radioactive darts to blow the heck out of solid tumors, so much so that they totally destroy them and they hardly affect the surrounding tissue. So you get, the most powerful anti-cancer effect without the collateral damage.
It's amazing. I want to zero in on something you said. You mentioned democratizing, and what you're doing is really democratizing investment. You're opening it up to the general public instead of keeping it all for a small few. And I think there's a pretty good case to be made that democracy didn't start with the Greco-Roman empires. I've heard many rabbis talk about, for instance, Micha Goodman. I don't know if he's a rabbi, but he's an Israeli philosopher. He wrote a good book on Deuteronomy, and I think it's in Deuteronomy 17 that says, when you come to the land, you'll appoint a king, and this is what it'll look like. He won't have many wives, won't have many horses, won't have much gold. And what that was the limitation of his diplomatic powers, because you had many wives in order to make peace with other kingdoms. Limitation of his military powers, not many horses. Limitation of he's not like all the economic power in the land. No, he's a civil servant who's going to serve the people, And then there was this ceremony where he had to stand before the priests and write down all the words of the law. So there's a separation of religion and state. And you say, wait a second, limited powers, separation of religion and state. These are things that are really based, if you say that the roots of democracy, which I think there's no question today, the capitalistic democracy is the best form of human flourishing, right? We've discovered that. It might not be utopia, but it's the best thing we've come up with.
There is a strong, tie with that. I mean, you look at, and again, it's part of the nature that the Bible has such a rich, a picture of human life. My sons, when they want to tell me, Dad, to delegate more, that I'm doing too much and keeping too much on my own plate, they'll say, look, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our rabbi, is told by Jethro, to go, delegate.
Right.
Okay, it's right there.
The tens and hundreds. And
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, and it's interesting that the way that we relate to the Bible and the fact that we talk about it every week in terms of a Parshat HaShavua, or the portion of the week. We go through the annual cycle to read the entire 5 books. It makes your interaction with, these are more than stories. These are sort of your extended family, literally. And whether you're born into the tribe or you have joined the tribe, it doesn't matter. They are your family, who you relate to, who are there sort of sitting at the table, either physically or, on Passover when we set a chair for Elijah, or put a cup, of wine, which I was certain growing up every time it was down. I don't know who had the task in our family to lighten that cup, but I said, where did that wine go? But the bottom line is that it's just it's a cool thing, and it's cool to be here in the country of Israel, where there's thousands of years of our history, where we are somehow in between this future, which we're helping as much as anybody in the planet to create, but being nourished by the past. And I think that that's perhaps the biggest lesson you can take, from Israeli and Jewish innovation, which is that you can embrace the future. We must embrace the future. We must develop technology, but we don't do so by abnegating or canceling, God forbid, the past. Right? In other words, we're informed by the past. We're enriched by our past. We're going to need help in terms of figuring out the moral pitfalls of this incredible power we're going to get from artificial intelligence and robotics. We're going to need to have rabbis and other religious leaders help inform this new, brave new world, because it's coming. And in order to avoid the sort of dystopian reality, we're going to need that wisdom from the past being brought into harmony with it.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I want to just thank you for your inspiring, first of all, for just what you do is wonderful for Israel and wonderful for the investors. By the way, every investor that I've ever referred to OurCrowd or recommended that they invest in OurCrowd have been very happy.
Thank God.
And it's worked out successfully for them. So yes, thank God and thank you. And and just thank you for coming here and being a part of the Arise Summit. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
My great-grandfather, Abraham Myers, was a Jewish businessman from Darmstadt, Germany. Unfortunately, Darmstadt was the first city that was boycotted by the Third Reich when they were calling to boycott all Jewish-owned businesses in order to cripple the economy of this community. We created Arise to make sure that that will never happen again. As anti-Semitic voices are rising once again around the world, and there's even this insidious campaign calling to boycott Israel, boycott Israeli companies, to isolate our economy, we want to do the opposite. We invite you to join our alliance and to help us by standing against these lies, spreading the truth about Israel, combating anti-Semitism, and creating more connectedness between the Israeli economy and the international community, which will just create security for Israel's future. Please sign up today to become a member of the Arise Alliance. Thank you so much.